Thank you so much, UNESCO, for hosting this. It really does feel like a landmark for me, I think, that the United Nations is bringing its focus and attention to these issues, issues which many of us here have been shouting about and trying to raise the alarm for many years. We are on the edge of a precipice, and we now know what the other side of that precipice looks like. We have seen it. It is violent insurrection, and it is genocide. That's what lack of regulation looks like. We no longer have the luxury of ignorance. This panel is going to be I think the idea is it's a sort of general and broad-ranging sort of scene setter for the conference and why these issues matter. But I was told I had 3 minutes at the start, so I thought in those 3 minutes I would just go back very briefly to 2016 when I started looking into the issue of fake news. And at that time, we knew a fraction of what we know now. And I was trying to investigate the role of social media in the elections of 2016, and particularly the Brexit referendum, the vote that changed the face not just of Britain, but of Europe. And as a journalist, what I discovered is that I couldn't find out what happened because this election had taken place almost overwhelmingly online, and all of the evidence had vanished. And in Britain, we have highly regulated elections. You have to register every leaflet. You have to account for every penny. And yet we had no idea who had seen what, who had placed those adverts, and who had paid for them. And the astonishing thing is that 7 years on, we still don't know. We still don't have that evidence. Facebook refused to hand it over to the British Parliament, and it's still refusing to. So I think all I will say is, over these 2 days, just bear in mind, you're going to hear from the platforms, you're going to hear many fine words, but we still have no means of accountability and no means actually of doing basic journalism. So I mention that actually because back in 2016, it felt like it was sort of this Orwellian nightmare I was being plunged into. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And at the end of 2017, I went into Parliament to give evidence. A committee had set up to start looking at these issues. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of relief that the grown-ups had turned up and were now looking at the issue. And I feel a similar emotion actually being here today. I feel a sense of relief. You are the grown-ups. And it is up to you, and I hope will be up to you, to bring about some change. So I just want to come on to this amazing panel. Maria, you've just heard from, with this astonishing keynote. I can't think of a better person to have here and to talk about these issues. She has been on the front line of this war of information and has taken a personal toll, as has her country, the Philippines.
Sorry, I just want to quickly, if you don't know Carole Cadwalladr, of course, right? She was the Global North representative in the chilling. And what happened, because Carole wasn't really a tech reporter, she pulled a strand and began running after the woman who broke Cambridge Analytica. Team George is just kind of the latest version of that. But that took a huge toll on you, right? We can, so...
I know, look, Maria is so much cheerier on these subjects in that way, and I would love to ask you about that personal toll, Maria. I'll just introduce briefly, we have Felipe Neto here, I hope I pronounced that right, who's an extraordinary Brazilian YouTube creator and influencer and now spokesman, essentially, who has spoken out very loudly and prominently about Bolsonaro and the platform's role in inciting hate and violence. He has 44 million subscribers on YouTube, which I can't even get my head around. And we also have Melissa Fleming here, who is the UN, she's the Under-Secretary for Global Communications. And in her previous life, she was a journalist and author until you got a proper job, Melissa. So, but Maria, actually, you know, I thought I'd start with you, and I had a different question in mind, but I think it was so powerful, your presentation, and this terrible demeaning vilification that you got online. And I just thought it'd be helpful if you could describe how that, you've told me before how that, the social media was what enabled then these legal attacks on you, and how the role really that you see Facebook played in that, and has led to the jeopardy which you're still in.
Yeah, I mean, my instinct is to turn it around on Carole, because I feel like you've gotten enough of me. But it's the exploitation of what was once advertising and marketing tools, and they didn't actually take into account how information operations can manipulate. And so, for me, it was you just wake up to it, and then you keep doing your job, and you have no choice but to be a punching bag. Carole, turn it around on her. I mean, you were a punching bag, right? And the gendered disinformation, and we talked about this before, when you're the reporter and you get pounded, you not only feel the insecurity, but it spreads, right? Like, how did you handle?
Nice try, Maria.
No, I mean, I'm serious, right?
I'm the moderator here.
No, because you think that in the global south, this stuff happens. Brazil, yes. Patricia Campos Mello, who's also in the audience, yes. Right?
Amazing. But can you explain how that actually then translated into legal actions which were taken against you? There was a direct line, wasn't there?
Okay, I better follow the moderator. How does it follow? It's like fertilizer is seeded in information operations. So the meta-narrative was journalist equals criminal. Say the lie a million times, and people who don't know me actually may think I'm a criminal. And then, a year later, it comes from President Duterte. He was then our president himself. He says, Rappler, journalists, Maria Ressa, is a criminal. And when it comes from power, we all know what that is like. When it comes from power, amplified through power, then what does a journalist do? You don't really have a recourse. So I reacted to it like a traditional professional journalist, which is I basically stayed quiet, which is the wrong thing to do if you're under attack. And then I pursued it in court. And in 2018, so you know the impact on a news organization. In January 2018, the government tried to shut us down. Within 4 months, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenue. And it was a war that we would have lost by the end of 2018, but we were forced to find a sustainable business model, and we did it through data and tech. And then 2019, I just kept getting arrested, 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years. So you kind of have to deal with that. But the other part that's hard is to see your fellow journalists and everyone in your society be afraid, stay quiet. Who are your supporters? Thank you, UNESCO. Thank you. Who are your supporters in something like this? Why did you keep going?
Oh, I don't know.
I try.
You know what? I'm going to go to Felipe next, if I may. So, Felipe, we now know a lot about the role. After the terrible violent insurrection in America in January the 6th, Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook stood up. She was interviewed and she said, "Oh, Facebook had nothing to do with this." We now know that's not true. We know that the social media platforms played an integral role in inciting that violence. Except, Felipe, can you tell me, you now in Brazil have had a very similar event. Where do you see the sort of role of the platforms in this?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Maria, I wish I had you in my life before, because everything that I had to face without the professional journalism inside me, it was really hard. In 2021, I had the police come over to my house, and I was being persecuted by the president, and there was an attempt to arrest me because I called him a genocidal, which he is. And it was a really hard battle to have, especially without any kind of information on how to battle the situation. A few months later, they tried to arrest me because of child corruption. I was accused of child corruption, and that is just impossible to give words what it is, to have people go into your house and with a loud car sound system calling me a pedophile to my neighbors and everyone around. It was all over television, and they used these tactics of war and did everything in their power to discredit me and try to silence me. They did this to a lot of people, Patricia Campos Melo, as you mentioned, and it's still going on. Even though they lost the election, now they're even angrier and trying everything to silence everyone who has reason, at least a little bit. So I'm sorry if I get a little emotional, because it's recent and it's been really hard to fight this. I can't put in words what it is to be called a pedophile. It is just unbearable. I had my followers, though, to fight this, and a lot of people don't. So that's why I created Vero Institute and the institute called Cala a Boca Já Morreu, which in Portuguese means shut up is dead, basically, to defend people who are not in a position of power to defend themselves. So we helped 40 different people that were attacked by the president with the same kind of allegations they did against me. We keep doing this, and we will keep fighting even though we won last election. And from the perspective of the digital influence and what happened, what I discovered is, even though lies spread much faster than facts, as you said, that this is proven, it's 6 times, even more sometimes, there's one thing we can do. There's one thing that works. And that, I just came across it. When in Brazil, we have 2 turns, right, of elections. And when we didn't win in the first turn, and we knew we would go to the second turn, I knew it would become a war in digital platforms. They would use every single lie they could possibly use to discredit Lula and try to win this election and turn it around. So I knew I had these followers, and I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what, because they would use lies and we only have facts. And what we do is we take the lies and we try to explain with links and fonts. Like, this is where the truth is, just read it. And that's the boring part. That's where people get, you know, I'm not going to read that. It's not interesting. It's much more entertaining to watch someone from the far right position scream and shout something. So what I did was I used the same technique. I tried to turn information and facts into entertainment. So I did the same kind of strategy, like showing the new news reports and everything with fun facts and funny messages. And during that time period, like 28 days, the videos that I made just telling people the lies they were spreading were lies got 300 million views. And that I didn't expect, but it was really important to show that it's possible to turn facts into something interesting and entertaining. Well, we won the election not because of me, of course, but we managed to beat the misinformation and everything that happened in Brazil. But then we had January 8th. There was the insurrection, the terrorist attacks against our institutions, and that was indeed because of how social media is structured today. And if we don't talk about shutting down the factory, as you said brilliantly, we cannot even try to solve this problem. We're still trying to moderate, we're still trying to fix the little things, trying to clean the glasses of water, and we need to talk about the factory. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and to give a perspective from the South, from Brazil. And we have a lot of work to do, and I'm really eager to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Felipe. That was very powerful. And as you say, it's a sort of extraordinary thing to have to deal with. So thank you for being here. Melissa, can I ask you a question? What I would like to know is, and I hope this isn't unfair, but you know, as I said, it feels like this amazing thing. We've got the United Nations; they've turned up, hurrah! Like, you know, the big guns have arrived. What happens now to turn? How do we stop this just being a talking shop? And how do we make sure that what goes on in the next 2 days actually is translated into action? And what's the process for that?
Thank you, Carole. But I'd first like to say to Felipe, I think you have more followers combined than all of the UN counts put together. So, I mean, it is a phenomenon, and it's amazing, but I can imagine also the incredible pressure that you have. And we at least have protectors. Also, there are female UN leaders and spokespeople putting themselves out there, including me, who are subjects to hateful attacks. But I think we're most concerned about, and that is what the UN is for, protecting the most vulnerable people on our earth. And this is where I think finally, I mean, you said the grown-ups started to come into the room in 2016. I think, as you'll see from this conference and many of the discussions that are happening also in the UN Secretariat and in our country offices all over the world, I really think also the UN has finally really woken up to this phenomenon. Sometimes it's very personal. For example, we just surveyed our peacekeepers, and 44% said that misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech on social media is impacting their ability to carry out their job. Their job is to keep the peace. We're seeing, I mean, incredible, things circulating that rile up the public, attacks on peacekeepers. And it's not only peacekeepers, it's our country offices around the world who are working, to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, which is, promoting equality, education, healthcare, climate action. In all of these areas, the facts are being undermined, and public trust is no longer really there. So it's much more difficult for the UN to make the world a better place. So what I'm saying internally, and I think what this conference is doing, Maria calls it our information ecosystem. We need to treat it very much like our environment. We are alarmed when our environment is polluted and when our rivers are full of toxins. We cannot live a healthy human existence. The same goes for information ecosystems. And if our information ecosystems all over the world are out of balance, in places where there is absolutely no moderation from social media platforms, it's even worse. So if we don't focus on this, we're never going to be able to make this world a better place. And finally, in that information ecosystem, the role of the media has to start also being recognized more. Rigorous journalism, the institution of public interest media that has really suffered as social media platforms took over their advertising models. And as you know, independent media are very vulnerable to lawsuits. And imagine in countries where they're extremely exposed. So promote independent media. I know that's very much in UNESCO's mandate as well, but we are really, really seized, and I'm working on leading the process for a code of conduct on information integrity on digital channels, which will also, pull the UN together. We will be very much informed by the outcome of this, and come together in standing up to the platforms, the factories, and at least advocating for fundamental change.
Thank you, Melissa. Maria, you go to an awful lot of conferences, and you talk an awful lot about these issues. Tell me how you see this conference as being different in terms of actually being able to achieve some of the things which we are endlessly talking about. And if there was, if you're trying to get across one thing to this audience, really, what do you want them to take away and to go away and do?
Oh, wow. Okay, so first, UNESCO itself, right? It's freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is under attack, and it's exponential attack. It's speech weaponized. So you have to flip that world. So the mandate of UNESCO is freedom of expression and safety of journalists. Journalists are under attack. And it isn't just us individually. I mean, and again, as the Global North representative in the chilling, you can see it's a psychological attack. It is a personal attack. It is turning your community against you. It is a breakdown of trust. It is insidious. I want to hear more about how you did this. But I would say the last part is that I keep thinking now of how do we deal with this. So I hope you here, please, let us move away from taking the glasses of water, because that is where everything is. And please be aware of, in the US last year, $70 million tech lobby. I sound very radical. I'm not. I'm a traditional broadcast journalist who has just seen the data, knows the tech. I am building tech in Rappler. That's one of the things we're trying to do. So the solutions, I guess that's focus on the solutions, because you can't talk anymore. We've been talking about this since 2016. And then the last part is, in this interim period, while you're debating the legislation, help journalism survive. There's a 10-point action plan that the Dmitry Muratov and I released, signed by a dozen Nobel laureates in Oslo last year. And in this one, we look at 3 buckets. The first one is very simple. Stop surveillance for profit. Shoshana Zuboff compares it to the slave trade. I didn't talk about how each of us on every social media platform, they use every atomized post you have is pulled together by machine learning to build a model of you. Replace the word model with clone. So they clone each of us based on our data, then use AI. That is what is used to micro-target. Micro-targeting is very different from advertising. Micro-targeting is insidious manipulation. That is what geopolitical power has weaponized into information warfare. Okay, sorry. So the first, I think, is just, we need to help independent journalism survive, and this is where the International Fund for Public Interest Media. I've been trying to hit all the ones. International Fund for Public Interest Media has, in last year, raised $50 million. That will go to help independent media survive while you're looking at legislation. So rush, because we're under attack, but that now is going out, and the goal there are the democratic countries. Put your money where your mouth is. You've only spent 0.3% of your ODA on independent media. You need us now, and we're under extreme attack. Kick it to 1%, and that will be $1 billion every year for independent media. Sorry, that's the difference.
That's a great ask. I love that. That's something really concrete that people in the audience could actually bring about. Is that what you're saying? They could actually help to save global journalism. That is incredible power that you have, and I think you only have to listen to Maria to understand how acutely the press is under attack and what the consequences are of that. And also just with what Felipe was saying as well. So Felipe, actually, I'm going to go to you now, and what I'm interested in with you as a sort of creator who's making this content for one of these platforms that we're talking about. You're really close to understanding the sort of, you see the algorithm in action, right?
Exactly.
You see the problems, you see the content moderation issues. Can you talk a little bit about that? And also maybe, was there a sort of moment when you got radicalized around this issue?
Yeah, so that point of view is brilliant. And I think the solution, the key is under one word that we need to discuss, and we need to write books about it, to read books about it, and to invest in research about that. We have a lot, but we need more. It is recommendation.
Brazil leads the way in this,
Yes.
right? The clustering algorithms of YouTube in particular.
Exactly. Recommendation is the entire business model of these companies, is how they profit. And it is, I'm sorry to use this word is very prejudiced, but it is the cancer of the problem. It is the root of the problem is recommendation, because it is hacking our brains to understand what can radicalize us, because they need more minutes from our attention. We are in a war of attention where the companies need to steal attention from each other, and they use any weapon they can to keep us logged in. And in order to make money, they need to go exactly against the public interest. That is, to not radicalize opinions, to not push us towards this craziness that is not crazy, but it sounds crazy. So we need to discuss the methods. We need to ask for transparency. I know we talk about transparency a lot, but how do they do recommendation system? They don't tell us,
Felipe,
ever.
Can I ask, have you asked that question of YouTube, and what do they tell you?
Nothing.
And what sort of thing? So tell me, do you have examples where your videos, after your videos, people are being recommended sort of far-right, violent, whatever,
Absolutely.
extremist content?
Yeah, so
you're feeding that in that sense?
I make money from recommendation. 70% of my views on YouTube, and I have over 17 billion views on YouTube. 70% of that comes from recommendation. So the entire environment is around recommendation system, and we need to understand how it works in order to prevent radical videos and extremists and etc. And I ask YouTube for 13 years. I've been asking them, how does it work? How can I push for? How can I be more when I wasn't really aware of this being a problem? I was asking, how can I get more recommendations? Now I need to understand how it works, and they don't tell you. They will never tell us unless we make them tell us, maybe.
And can I say, I mean, I think this is a real issue, because at conferences like this, we will have people come from the platforms, from Google and Facebook. Google has sent their head of human rights here, who will speak about the company's interests, genuine interest in human rights. But yet, if we're not addressing things like this, those words are meaningless. And I think that you've got to hold that very, their head of recommendation is not here. We're not able to ask them questions. Nobody's able to ask them questions, are they?
No, they don't answer to these questions. And what I did was try to hack their own system. So every time I saw, like I said, there's 300 million views. Every time I saw a lie, I used the same keywords to get recommended into the extremists. Right? So when people would watch the extremist videos, I would get recommended. So I used the same targeted audience to try to hack that system and get inside and talk to people like, this is a lie, and in a funny way, give the message. But it's so hard. It is so hard. Sometimes I would get inside the video of a radicalized person, and I wouldn't find any counterpoint, any whatsoever, just things that push you forward into that point of view. And we really need to ask these companies, what are you doing, and how can you sleep at night? How can you say you're worried about human rights when you literally use radicalization for profit? This cannot stand. We need to fight radicalization for profit.
I want to annotate him and give you a link. So the study that did this in Brazil, it started with Zika and then looked at how the far right and the conspiracy theorists in network clustering algorithms, people who would never have met each other in the real world, were pulled together by these clustering algorithms. The video was recommended. This essentially brought Bolsonaro to the presidency. Right, so the guy, Google, Jonas Kaiser, this is the study that he did. There's a paper there, but you will also see several things. Zika was one. So it's incredible that you spend time to look at how you get recommended into that ecosystem. But this is what they expect journalists to do, and we don't do that. Exactly.
It's impossible to ask for journalists and academics to invest in this. What we need maybe do, before they change this, we hope, we need, and this I would like to ask UNESCO, we We need to bring more influencers to the table. I know it sounds kind of silly, but we need to talk to influencers, because I had a life of my father is a psychologist, my mother works with education, so I had this life where I got interested in books. But we have a lot of influencers who don't. They have no idea what we're discussing here. They're just making funny videos, and they can make a difference. They can help us if we talk to them. So I urge UNESCO, talk to influencers. They really can help, and they want to help. They just don't know how.
But in the Philippines, these influencers were weaponized to attack journalists.
Oh, yeah.
So you grew from gaming, right? Like, is that where you came
sometimes,
through?
yeah.
Lots of
I also
different
do gaming,
things?
yes.
Yeah. So that's the problem. You are, in some ways, I mean, there are more people like you, but what do we do when they're used to attack?
Exactly. We need to bring us to our side. We need to talk to them. They will listen if we talk to them, but they have no one talking to them right now. People are just expecting from each other. We need to stop expecting and start talking and start asking and start inspiring. We can inspire people, especially the influencers. They can come to our side.
Maybe if I can add there, as somebody who runs the UN social media accounts and a campaign called Verified that we tested also in Brazil during the pandemic, which really was to mobilize influencers, because it was very clear that we were not going to reach people broadcasting from UN headquarters in New York, and that the only way in this system, also of recommendations, in a system where the United Nations on Facebook, for example, is classified as a civic institution, which means our starting point is downranked. We are downranked. We've never been able to get that changed, even though we do really think we are the source of trusted information science.
Ressa, can you just explain that a bit more? You're saying that the United Nations on Facebook is downranked as a source of authoritative information. You're kidding. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's true.
And what?
Well, they're not calling people communists. That's what people want to watch.
So we're in this constant battle. I mean, this was particularly after 2018, where we kind of went into this category with other news organizations. But given ad credits to try to then lift that post to the level of the Joe conspiracy theory post, so that we can compete. So what we have tried to do, what we have done, I think, successfully, is that we have gone to influencers. I mean, beyond our usual celebrity influencers, who do make a huge gazillions, like Leo DiCaprio on climate, massive. He takes our messaging, he delivers them to his fans. But what we found during COVID-19, which was even more effective, was to use micro-influencers. People in the communities who spoke languages, who had cultural relevance. In places also where social media platforms have no cultural knowledge and have no language moderators. But to mobilize those forces for good, because what we did find is that if we created content that was engaging, that traveled well on social media, that was based on facts, boring facts, yes, but made into entertaining, and gave them to people who already had big followings, because there are so many who want to, spread the truth and to have a positive impact on communities. So
write my number. Let's discuss after this. I'm
Please join forces with us.
I'm 100% available to help. I really want to help you build this. I really do.
I can't get my head around this absurdity that the United Nations is having to compete on Facebook against conspiracy theorists, and that the marketplace is treating these as equal. I mean, well, in terms of a starting point for this conference, that has to be it, right? You're the United Nations. You shouldn't be competing against conspiracy theorists to get attention to what you're actually doing here online. And there are people from these platforms here, and these are the questions which need to be asked over the next 2 days. And you need to get answers, I think. And if these aren't the right people here, then we have to find a way of you bringing those people, I think. see Maria nodding. What are you going to say, Maria?
No, I think you need to move beyond the false equivalence. So when I was first being attacked and I went to Facebook and Facebook said, but you're a public figure. Like, that's normal. That's not normal. I think we have to go beyond that this is human nature. It isn't human nature. There's a system, rule of law. And that system has been undermined. Look, we sound like we're against tech. I love tech. I mean, it is critical. We cannot put the genie back in the bottle, but what we do need are guardrails to protect citizens, to protect consumers. It's like a better business bureau. What Felipe was describing is like that Facts First PH pyramid is essentially an influencer marketing campaign for facts. But why do we have to do that? Why does, this is the public good. This is the public sphere. And you need to protect that. And, I guess the difference is, I'll pull it back to something that's very familiar to all of us. When you run a news organization, there's the news organization's own need for money, and then there's the editor, the editor and the journalist, right? Oftentimes they clash. And a good news organization still does the story. I mean, I took the risk to go to jail because I think it's protecting the public sphere. So if you're going to be the gatekeeper, dear tech people, then you have responsibilities. And you in the room must demand that happen, that there be accountability. Impunity must stop.
I want to go to that, actually, Melissa, with that question, which is, I really appreciated what you said about UNESCO's, the focus on the victims. And that, I think, just has to be front and center in everything that is, we're talking about in this conference. And I think particularly about what happened in Myanmar. And so few people actually understand that the genocide in Myanmar. The United Nations did a report, and they found that Facebook played a determining role in that, in the murder of tens of thousands of people, and what they said was a textbook case of ethnic cleansing. And the key thing about that report is that it had no consequences. Nobody was held to account, and there has been absolute impunity. And there has been no justice and no answers even for the Rohingya who have been trying to advocate for that. Tell me, it feels, I do feel this gets forgotten and that we don't we haven't faced up to what that is and read the warning signs there. What role does the United Nations have, Melissa, in ensuring that something like that doesn't happen again, although it already has?
Thanks, Carole, for bringing up Myanmar, because I think it is, one of the most, horrific examples of the consequence of, there was this. The UN is trying to connect everybody. We heard here, we'd love everybody to have the right to be connected to the internet, but Myanmar was very, very disconnected, and Facebook had this, dream to go in and give everybody the chance to be online, but only under one condition, that you access online through the Facebook app. And so we're giving them the tools without protecting them against the dangers, and people who have, really no experience in navigating. And what they were getting in their feeds was hate, was dehumanizing language, was the language that, it gave license to kill, license to rape, license to throw babies in fires, license to drive. And so have we learned? It's really hard until Max Fisher just wrote a book, The Chaos Machine, and has really has written in detail, because our report was detailed, but the detail here, I think everybody should read what happened, and this should raise alarm bells. What can be done to prevent? Have we seen change? Have we seen more human moderation? Have we seen people who can speak speak languages? Have we seen more curation and let's not, march into countries and connect people to understand what a fragile environment this is, and the ethnic hatreds and issues and the turning point. But this isn't, unfortunately, being done.
Thanks, Melissa. Felipe, I wanted to ask you, essentially you're living the dream. You are the person who kids all over the world dream about becoming, this influencer with an enormous platform, enormous power. I'm sure it's a great living also. And you wouldn't have had access to speak in this way to this audience without these tools. And so you're an example of how this connected world does create opportunities for voices which wouldn't have been heard. My question is it worth it, do you think? Well, now you also understand the harms of it. Where do you fall on that line?
Well, absolutely. I don't want to sound ungrateful. Everything that I accomplished in my professional life, it was because of YouTube. It was because of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Of course, we don't want to shut down the platforms. We don't want to fight them in a level of creating a war. It's not about that. It's about accountability. It's about stopping, what's the word you said? Impunity. It's stopping impunity. It's bringing them to the table and saying you need to be a part of the discussion, but you also need to be responsible for the mistakes that you made and you will make. That's the starting point. So I think I would do it all over again, even the mistakes that I made. But I was basically in 2015, I discovered that I had a huge child audience, for example. And I didn't know that before because YouTube was a platform for over 13. So what I did when I discovered that is I changed everything that I did. I used bad words. I used to talk about sex. I stopped. I realigned my speech, and I started changing everything that I did. And I started to study how to talk to children, like the responsibilities that you have when you have children watching you. What I think that is happening is these platforms, every day they discover a new thing that they need to be responsible for, and they just keep waiting for something to happen. Yeah. They keep asking for something to happen, like regulate us. Stop saying regulate us. Come to the table and take accountability for what you're doing. Stop just asking for people to solve your problems.
Problems you created.
Yeah, the problems you created. So we want to help. But we don't want to be in that position that you're putting us. So I think I would do it all over again. They shouldn't.
Thanks, Felipe. We have 55 seconds left. Maria, can I just take final thoughts, I suppose, from the panel? What do you want to leave the audience with?
In the short term, the tech companies have the ability to lead to a better place. They just have to moderate their greed and act like leaders instead of the 3Ds, deny, deflect. So do it, please. That's the first. And then for all of us, it's time to stop talking. The evidence is there. The impact on all of us, there are 10,000 plus internal documents that were released by Frances Haugen, the Facebook whistleblower, but it isn't just Facebook, right? You heard YouTube, Twitter, of course we all know. This is what is connecting us, and it is harming us. The toxic sludge is pushing the worst of humanity. That has to stop.
Thanks, Maria. One sentence, Melissa.
I agree. I don't think it is a reflection of our true society, but it is dividing our societies and causing enormous harm. And it has the potential to do so much good, to have voices amplified like Felipe and facts and science that would dominate our discourse and promote human trust. So I think, the platforms say that they want this, and let's all work together and make an information ecosystem that is healthy, where people can thrive and human rights can be at the center.
Felipe, one sentence.
Stop hurting children, please.
Thank you. And I think on that we will wrap up there. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, UNESCO, for having us.